305, donde surgen los campeones, 305 Fights, where the champions rise. We have Sifu Guru Dwight Woods talking about Filipino martial arts, its impact in combat sports and sports. Thank you very much for coming. A lot of people know you as a Jeet Kune Do Rebel and Jeet Kune Do. But tell us a little bit about a little bio about yourself and the Filipino martial arts.
I started Filipino martial arts with Dan Inasano in July of 1983. Actually, the camp that I went to, I went for Dan Inasano. I didn't go, yes, I was on the Jeet Kune Do path, but it was only afterwards that I realized that on the roster of instructors, it said Dan Inasano, Filipino Kali. It was only like a long time after that I realized that. But that didn't matter to me. I knew who Dan Inasano was. I knew what his relationship to Bruce Lee was. So I was there for the person. I wasn't necessarily there because of whatever. In other words, whatever he was teaching was fine with me. You know, that was not, I went for, as a matter of fact. So here's another one, right? So I just showed you those two. So this is March of 1976.
Wow.
And so Bruce Lee's on the cover because there is an article in here about Jeet Kune Do. And in the very last pages of the article, you'll see it shows Filipino martial arts, now part of the JKD curriculum. What's interesting is that years later, again, because this was 76, and I started with Inasano 7 years later in 83, in this same magazine, there was this article, right? Can you see that?
Yes.
Right? This is an article about Ben Largusa. Now here's what's funny, right? I find it funny. Ben Largusa, initials BL, Bruce Lee, initials BL. They were both at the 1964 internationals where Dan Inasano met Bruce Lee. And if I have the story correctly, it was at that same time that Dan Inasano decided that he would try to train with both people, with both Ben Largusa and Bruce Lee. And here's something that my senior, Guy Chase, in Boston, what he has revealed. Ben Largusa was also connected to Ed Parker. And as a matter of fact, Ed Parker really had the idea for Ben Largusa to be Kato.
Wow.
Yeah.
I learned from all the guests I have, and in the process of martial arts, and that's something that we want to get across, especially the young guys, is that martial arts is a process of never-ending learning and expanding.
Because education never ends.
Correct.
Right.
And you just said something about the weapon. See, the weapon taught me, again, the tactical considerations and possibilities of combat. I'll give you an example. When you have a weapon, if you get hit, it's not the same thing as getting hit with a gloved fist.
No.
It hurts. So you have to be aware of the distance, the angle, the range. Your methods of defense change, where you cannot always block, especially like a knife or a blade.
Right.
So, natural motion system, which is our martial arts that we employ in 305 Fights Gym, taught me to look at combat, even sports combat, even MMA, like the person has a weapon in his hand. If I can use the tactical considerations of that, then I become more proficient, even in MMA or boxing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you said that, I immediately thought of two things. What I heard is, and you know the names better than I do, but Rose
Eunice.
Okay. So I, if I got my information correctly, I heard that she has been trained in what we call knife sparring, which is derived from Filipino martial art. I have a knife in my hand, you have a knife in your hand, and we start with one target, the back of the hand. And the idea is cut, but don't get cut. Okay? And then there can be infinite variations or permutations of this. We could go with the knife in this hand and put a glove on this hand. So that now when I get the chance, I throw the rear hand at you. Right? We could put the headgear on, we can put the shin gear on, you can bring the level up, you can start adding the striking or you could just keep it as a fun game for kids, right? And try to cut each other in the hand.
You know what though? Think about the technical skill, the reflex skill.
Yeah.
That you will get that's going to improve whatever you do.
Right.
Boxing, kickboxing, MMA. In fact, when I coach a professional, I tell them, listen, the style I'm going to give you is skill. Spanish, destreza. Right. Because skill beats every style.
Yeah.
Before I get into the transition of weapon to empty hand, which you opened up, I think they believe they call it panatukan and whatnot. At your academy, what is the relationship of these weapons and the rest of your curriculum?
Right. Well, here's what people say, right? Oh, so why do you learn the double stick, right? Nobody walks around with two sticks. Well, actually, that's wrong, because here I am in the studio with two sticks. So there's at least one moron out there that walks around with two sticks, right?
And you do have two hands.
Right. As a matter of fact, and that did remind me of something. I do not refer to Muay Thai as the art of 8 limbs.
Okay.
There's only 4 limbs, but it is the art of 8 weapons.
Oh, I see. Good, because I'm always upgrading my terminology in my language. Yeah. I'm a believer of that.
It's the art of 8 weapons because there's only 4 limbs.
Wow.
Yes,
I see. Oh,
we
yes.
have 2, 2, 2, and 2. So
yes.
It's the art of 8 weapons.
Now, the transition of the weapon to the empty hand.
Yes.
Do you use panatukan or the different terms or?
Panantukan is a term, again, to the best of my understanding. Panantukan is a term that refers to Filipino boxing. Okay, so it's not. It is actually, Panantukan is a subset or a sub-area of the area called Pangamut, or Kamut, or some people might call it Mano Mano. So Pangamut is the empty hands portion of the art of Kali. Because I told you before, there's 12 areas of training. So 10 of them are weapons, and then there's an area of empty hands, and then there's an area which is what I call the metaphysical aspects of it. So 10 areas are weaponry, but Pangamut is the empty hands. So then within Pangamut, there is kicking and punching, trapping and grappling, kind of the way that we break it down in Jeet Kune Do. Mm-hmm. So one way that the weapon is related to the empty hands, if I can lock and throw with the weapon, imagine how much easier it is for me to do it empty hands. If I can go, so what you do is you train weapons versus weapon. Same weapon. So you have single stick, I have single stick. But then maybe you have single stick, I have stick and dagger. Maybe you have stick and dagger, I have double dagger. So we have all these variations, and we go in and out. Oh, and one thing I have to tell you before I forget, because you know, my old brain. Bruce Lee said, if you understand motion, you understand all the styles. Here we have an art that is based on understanding hand and body motion with or without weapons. You tell me it's not related to Bruce Lee's idea of Jeet Kune Do?
Our system is natural motion system.
Right.
With evolvement and evolution, we talked about that, you'll get to these conclusions. I found the, let's say Pagamut for, no, what's the other word with a G, Gara, that you mentioned? When we talked about the Panatukan, that translate to empty hand?
Pangamut.
Okay.
Pangamut would be like the overall term for empty hands, or kamut.
Okay. I found that very helpful for me to understand more the hand method in martial arts that can be used in any combat sport. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when I came to that conclusion, I started doing it. Recently, they came up with a name of it. They call it dirty boxing.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? This has been done from the get-go, and they have systems of this.
Yeah.
Of this, because again, it's not limiting yourself. It's seeing the possibilities of your hands.
I'm a purist, And so I rejected the idea of dirty boxing. I was like, why do we have to call it dirty? It's just Filipino boxing. What the heck is wrong?
Yes,
What are the Filipinos are dirty or something? Right? But I mean, but that's just because my default position is to oppose everything. Right?
You said the point. When I saw it, I said, this has been in Cali a long time ago before now.
Yeah.
I think you know what's happening now, and it's good, and I think it continues going. Maybe we could call it the modern martial arts. They're eventually going to pick up all this technology that has been there in these cultural arts. Because I think in combat, you either evolve and pick them up, or you're going to die or get beaten.
Right. A lot of times people miss, like you were saying earlier. A lot of times people miss stuff because they don't know anything about the culture, and because they're not interested in the cultural aspects, and so they miss a lot of stuff, right? Because the society, the society is down. We could say it. So I think the official saying is that the culture is downstream from the religion, and then the politics or the social aspects are downstream from the culture. So if people do not have an appreciation for the culture, then their true understanding of the art is going to be lacking.
Correct.
You see? So you have to understand some aspects of the culture, which was the thing that Bruce Lee said, that if he could introduce people to Chinese culture or to aspects of Chinese culture, then that might pave the way for people to appreciate different cultures, not just Chinese, but different cultures.
Exactly.
Right? And in effect, then, so now we have everybody appreciating everybody else's culture respectfully. So what happens? The world goes like this, right? So we were having a conversation the other day, and I told people that we were trying to come up with what is the one thing that's necessary for everybody to, let's use a phrase, learn to get along. And I said, if we have to boil it down to one thing, it is education. That's it. Everybody learning more about other people's thing, and in that way also learning more about your thing, because you have to know about your thing.
Yeah.
You know, so if people of African descent know more about the history of Africa, then they might be able to stand taller, stand prouder. But everybody has a glorious history.
Right.
You know?
But you know what, you made a good point, because I have a brother that is actually Filipino martial arts. His name is Brandon, and he happens to be also an African high priest in African religion. And I tell you something, you're not going to believe me. I study a lot of the African cosmology and cult and philosophy to understand the Chinese philosophy. What I do, for example, this one theorist, he was talking about the symbol of the circle in Africa and how it means continuation. And I said, oh my God, he's giving a lecture on Baguazhang cosmology.
Yeah.
And seeing this interconnection. And I see, and with the modern arts combat sports, listen, these elite guys, they're traveling to the Philippines, they're traveling to Indonesia, they're traveling all around the world and evolving their training and their art. This is nothing but good, because it's going to open their eyes to this culture. Okay. And then it's going to have, and then eventually I think has to trickle down. What do you think?
I'm going to channel Dan Insano now, right? Okay. So we've talked somewhat, we've mentioned African culture. We've mentioned Chinese culture. We're talking Filipino martial arts, right? Okay. What's one thing that all of them have in common? A very commonplace thing, in fact, right? The Japanese have it too, right? The Cubans have it. The Argentinians have it, right? It's a very commonplace thing that everybody has. Rice.
Correct.
Okay?
That's a staple in our diet.
That is how closely connected all peoples of the world are. You find me a place in the world where it's like, rice? What the heck is that? Yeah. We don't know rice. Yeah. Right? And if it's not native to your part of the world, it's been brought in somehow, somewhere. Correct. That is how closely connected.
And you know what we're speaking about? That if you look at martial arts as the essence or the similarities or the universality of, and you say rice, now it's just the way you prepare your rice.
Exactly.
And present it. You said, and introduce your rice.
Yeah.
So if you add, like in Colombia, some cocoa and coconut and raisins, so now it has the coast Caribbean Colombian taste. If you add, and so I found that even for myself, when I teach martial arts and I want to teach the essence of martial arts, we have to have the basis. What I call the essence is the rice. And then we can learn different ways to present this, different ways to serve it, which is that tactical, that's only going to make you better in martial arts. I'll give an example. Freddie, I think it was, what's Manny Pacquiao's trainer in boxing training? I forgot his name. Freddie Roach. Freddie Roach was training Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. The father is the famous Julio Cesar Chavez, on the heavy bag. And he was training him to get more power in his right hand or strike. And guess what he was doing? He had him with a staff hitting a bag.
Yeah.
And I said, there you have a weapon introduced to teach the technical aspect of how to make the mechanics better.
Yeah.
What's your idea on that?
So here's the thing. There are commonalities in between weapons and empty hands, but not everything that I do with the staff is going to be identical to what I do in single stick. There will be crossover sometimes, but think about it. See, if I'm going to hit you with this, what my body has to do is a little bit different than if I pull the stick out and I'm going to hit you with the stick. The stick being 28 inches long, it generates more momentum and more force by its nature of being 28 inches. So we have that long arc. So when I hit you with that, I don't need to snap my hip the way I snap my hip when I hit you with this. You see? So, and this is another area where I get into trouble, because most martial artists will say what? The weapon is what? The weapon is an extension of empty hands. No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay? Right? I don't look at it that way, because then that means that they're identical. One is just longer than the other. And that's not true. There's a deeper science to it. But it's a convenient saying. Everybody understands it or thinks they understand it when they hear it. But I kind of refuse to use it.
No, point. What do you think that people that are listening, combat sports martial artists, let's say they don't do a lot of weapons, what can they do with kali stick, a staff, with some kind of weapon to improve their skill level or their tactics?
Most people will gravitate automatically towards what we call Heaven 6, which is the inward backhand, inward backhand thing. I think most people, that's probably what you would see people teaching other people out there to enhance their coordination. And that's fine, right? But they got to understand how to apply it. Because if I go like this, and I go right hand, then I go left hand, and then I go right hands, right? So it's 1, 2, 3. A lot of people translate that into block, check, hit. But that violates Jeet Kune Do terms, because in Jeet Kune Do, I don't block with my lead hand. As much as possible, the lead hand is reserved for attacking. The rear hand is reserved for defending. You see? So people make this mistake. They'll teach block, check, hit. Now watch this. Right hand, left hand, right hand. Left hand, right hand, left hand. So you see that left hand motion? Now look at it.
Right.
You see? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4 is what I want. You see?
Yes.
Because now I get 4, 5, 6. You see? So I don't want 1, 2, 3 of the 6 count from Heaven 6. People just have to have a deeper understanding of how to apply it. I have that because my concern is always, how does the Filipino martial arts stuff enhance the Jeet Kune Do? Because I don't think of them as separate.
I'll tell you one thing that I think will transition good into sport. You were showing just recently in your Facebook videos a drill with the kali stick, and you were saying, of course, my feet will be moving, and if you're stationary, you have to be a little bit ready to move, because I am very big on moving and fighting, what I call running and hitting. And that's why when I saw I have friends of mine in the Pikiri Tirsha system, one of the things I enjoyed was that we have a rule called hand and foot have to move. What's your idea on that?
It's similar, but it's not identical. You see? Now, but if you watch, I think I remember the video you're talking about. I do mention that when I step into the strike, that I try to synchronize and coordinate hand and foot. So there is that aspect to it for sure, right? But so they are connected, but they're not identical. And that's why at Unified Martial Art, we differentiate between that which is translation and that which is interpretation. You see? So as bilingual people, you know that there are Spanish phrases that do not translate word for word into English.
Correct.
And vice versa. It's the meaning of it. It's the interpretation of it. So that's similar. So what I showed you just now about inward backhand, it does not always translate.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to interpret the motion, and that's important. So knife versus empty hands, it's not going to be identical. No way, because there are some people who knife fight and put the weapon in the back. Then there's some who like to put the weapon up front. Some people's theory is that I want the weapon between the two of us all the time. You see, I don't want to go like this, because if I have my empty hand between, and you have a weapon, you have a knife, you might cut me in the hand. But when you try to cut my knife hand, I got that. So, they're different.
Again, I talk about the African cosmology. My mother happens to practice African religion. And there's a saying in that religion is that el conocimiento está repartido. The knowledge is spread. Meaning everybody has it. So you never know, you talk to somebody that has a part of the knowledge that you don't.
Exactly.
And then you mentioned respect and honor, which is one of the virtues in 305 Fights. So I want to use this moment to end the podcast with that note. Again, thank you so much for your time to provide a platform for the martial arts. Respect and honor, 305 Fights.
305 Miami, the champion league.